They forgot you. That was the sentence my mother used. Not "I'm sorry," not "we messed up," just "they forgot you." I was sitting at my desk in downtown Denver, the late afternoon sun cutting across quarterly logistics reports I'd already memorized. My coffee had gone cold, untouched, when Mom's voice came through the phone, tight and careful in that familiar Midwest way she used when delivering bad news she hoped would pass quietly. "Claire, honey, we need to talk about Evelyn's wedding." I leaned back in my chair. "What about it? I already cleared the time off. It's in 3 weeks, right?" Silence. The kind that makes your chest tighten before your mind catches up. "Well, that's the thing. Your father and I were finalizing the travel plans, and somehow we didn't book your flight or hotel. Everything in Maui is completely booked now. Peak season." I stared at the framed family photo on my office wall. Christmas, last year. Evelyn in the center, glowing. Luke grinning, Mom and Dad beaming. Me on the edge of the frame, half a step back, smiling like I always did. "You didn't book mine," I said slowly. "Oh, sweetheart, these things happen," Mom replied quickly. "There were so many details. Evelyn's been under so much stress. She's devastated, of course, but she understands." "Understands what? That her own sister didn't make the list?" I swallowed hard. "So, I'm not coming." "We'll send you pictures," she said, relief softening her voice. "You know how sensitive Evelyn gets before big events. It's probably better this way." "Better for whom?" I hung up without arguing. That's what I'd always done. I was Claire Morgan, the reliable one, the daughter who never needed reminders, the sister who didn't demand attention, the woman who made life easier for everyone else by taking up as little space as possible. And that was exactly why they forgot me. For years, I'd shown up quietly. Birthdays celebrated late, accomplishments acknowledged with polite nods, sacrifices unnoticed because I never complained. I carried projects at work without credit. I held family dynamics together by staying agreeable. I told myself that being dependable meant being valued. But sitting there, alone in my office, it finally clicked. Dependable doesn't mean unforgettable. It means convenient. My phone buzzed again. A group text from Mom, Dad, Evelyn, and Luke. "We love you. Thank you for being so understanding." I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the report on my screen, opened my laptop, and typed something I'd never searched before. One-way international flights. Because if I was going to be forgotten anyway, I was done standing still waiting to be remembered. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me. Instead, I lay awake in my Denver apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated in slow, perfect circles, thinking about how long this story had been writing itself without my consent. I had always been the easy one. Mom liked to say it proudly, especially when relatives visited. "Claire never gave us any trouble," she'd tell them. "She was always so independent." Independent was the word they used when they didn't want to explain neglect. When Evelyn wanted piano lessons, she got them. When she wanted to quit, no questions asked. When she chose architecture school on the East Coast, my parents rearranged their finances to support her dream. Luke followed behind her, the baby of the family, protected from consequences with a smile and a shrug. And me? I learned early not to ask. I learned that birthdays could be celebrated later, that my college acceptance didn't need a party, that if I solved problems quietly, people liked me more. I learned to swallow disappointment and call it maturity. By the time I built my career in supply chain analysis, that habit was second nature. I stayed late, fixed what others broke, took responsibility when projects went wrong, and stepped aside when praise was handed out. I told myself it didn't matter, but it always did. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Linda Harris, my department director. She studied me across her desk, eyes narrowing slightly, as I explained I wanted a long sabbatical. 14 months. That's not a vacation, she said. That's a reset. I nodded. I need one. She leaned back, considering. You've carried more than your share here, Claire. People rely on you because you make it easy for them to. That's not always a compliment. Her words landed heavier than she probably intended. I'll approve it, she continued. Your position will be waiting. But don't be surprised if things don't look the same when you come back. That afternoon, I typed a single message into the family group chat. I won't be attending the wedding. I'm taking some time away and will be offline for a while. No explanations, no apologies. The responses came fast. Evelyn, what do you mean you're not coming? Luke, wait, where are you going? Mom, Claire, don't be dramatic. Let's talk. I set the phone face down. Over the next few days, I sold my couch, my dining table, and the bed frame I'd bought because it seemed practical. I arranged to sublet my apartment to a coworker. I put my car in long-term storage. Everything I owned that mattered fit into 2 suitcases and a carry-on. The calls kept coming. Voicemails piled up. Concern mixed with irritation, then guilt. Still, no one asked the one question that mattered. Why did this hurt you so deeply? Because deep down, they already knew. And for the first time in my life, I chose not to make it easier for them to ignore the answer. The airport was busy in that familiar, impersonal way. Families in matching shirts, couples arguing softly over carry-ons, a group of women laughing too loudly near the security line, already in vacation mode. I watched them from a distance, standing alone with my passport in my hand. Somewhere over the Pacific, my sister would be saying her vows on a white beach in Maui. The wedding everyone remembered to plan for. The ceremony I wasn't important enough to be included in. My boarding pass didn't say Honolulu. It said Tokyo. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because for the first time, the decision belonged only to me. No explanations, no justifications, no asking if it made sense. As I sat at the gate, my phone vibrated again. Mom, Evelyn, Luke. I turned the phone off completely. While we waited to board, my mind drifted to the one person in my family who had always seen me clearly. My grandmother. She passed away years ago, quietly, the way she lived. On my 25th birthday, I received a letter from her attorney and a modest inheritance she had arranged privately. Not life-changing money, but meaningful. Along with it came a handwritten note, her cursive, careful but firm. Claire, you were never loud, but you were never small. Don't let anyone confuse the two. Use this wisely. Make yourself proud. I had invested most of it over the years, watched it grow slowly, patiently, the same way I had grown, unnoticed by the people closest to me. That money had always felt like a promise waiting to be kept. When the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, I stood without hesitation. On the plane, I chose a window seat. As Denver disappeared beneath the clouds, something inside me loosened. Not joy exactly, relief. For so long, my life had been built around staying available, staying reachable, staying reasonable. Up there, suspended between where I had been and where I was going, I finally understood something I'd avoided my entire adult life. You don't find yourself by waiting to be chosen. You find yourself by leaving the room when you're no longer welcome, even if no one ever said you couldn't stay. As the plane leveled off, I rested my forehead against the glass and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't being forgotten. I was simply gone. Tokyo didn't care who I was. No one there knew I was the daughter who was forgotten, the sister left out of a wedding, the employee who held departments together without recognition. I was just another woman navigating subway lines, bowing too late, mispronouncing words, and learning by watching. And oddly enough, that anonymity felt like oxygen. I stayed in a small business hotel near Asakusa. The room was barely larger than my old walk-in closet back home, but it was clean, quiet, and intentional. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. That discipline fascinated me. It mirrored something I'd practiced my whole life without realizing it: restraint. I spent mornings walking through neighborhoods before the crowds arrived. Shop owners swept their doorways. Elderly couples moved in synchronized silence. There was respect in the way people occupied space. They didn't apologize for existing, nor did they demand attention. I enrolled in a short calligraphy course in Kyoto later that week. The instructor corrected me gently but firmly, reminding me that every stroke required commitment. Hesitation showed. Uncertainty bled into the ink. "You must decide before you touch the paper," he said. "Otherwise, the mark will betray you." That stayed with me. From Japan, I moved through Seoul and then Bangkok, staying longer in each place. I listened more than I spoke. I watched how small businesses adapted, how vendors negotiated without aggression, how relationships mattered more than speed. Patterns began to emerge, ones I'd never noticed sitting behind spreadsheets in Denver. In Chiang Mai, on a quiet recommendation from a cafe owner, I signed up for a 6-week digital strategy program run by a mix of expats and local professionals. I didn't announce it. I didn't tell anyone. I simply showed up. For the first time in years, my questions weren't dismissed as details. My insights weren't absorbed and repackaged by louder voices. People listened. They asked follow-ups. They challenged me thoughtfully. I realized something uncomfortable and freeing at the same time. I hadn't been overlooked because I lacked value. I'd been overlooked because I kept offering it at a discount. At night, I journaled instead of scrolling through missed calls. I wrote about what I noticed, what made sense, what didn't. Slowly, a different version of my life began forming on the page. One that didn't revolve around being agreeable. Somewhere between temple bells and late-night street markets, I stopped wondering when I would go back. I started asking myself something far more dangerous. What if I didn't? I checked my phone every other Sunday, never more than 5 minutes, long enough to confirm one thing: the world hadn't ended without me. By the end of the second month, the message count had climbed past 70. Emails, voicemails, text stacked in uneven emotional waves. At first, the tone was sharp. "You can't just disappear like this. This isn't funny, Claire." Then came the worry. "Please just tell us you're safe. Your father hasn't been sleeping." And finally, guilt. "We know we hurt you. Can we please talk?" I didn't open a single one. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew myself well enough to understand this: if I responded too soon, I'd be pulled right back into explaining, soothing, reassuring, making it easier for them to move on without ever sitting with what they'd done. Instead, I poured that energy somewhere else. In Hanoi, I met Diane Walker at a quiet cafe overlooking a narrow street where scooters never seemed to stop flowing. She was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed and unimpressed by credentials. A retired international trade consultant who now advised small exporters selectively and brutally honestly. She listened as I explained my background, my travels, and what I was trying to understand. After a moment, she smiled. You've been invisible because you let people benefit from you without cost. I stiffened. Family does that best, she added calmly. They don't mean to, but intention doesn't erase impact. Diane introduced me to the realities of cross-border trade at ground level. Not theory, practice. Quality disputes, cultural missteps, contracts broken because trust was assumed instead of earned. She didn't coddle me, and she didn't rescue me when my first attempt at advising a small workshop failed quietly and expensively. You rushed, she said. You tried to prove yourself instead of listening. The second attempt went better. Slower, thoughtful, adjusted. I started seeing results. Not dramatic ones, not yet, but real. And for the first time, my growth didn't come from surviving disappointment. It came from choosing intention. If you were in my place, would you go back and explain yourself? Or would you keep building quietly until your life spoke for you? Leave a comment with your advice, because what comes next changes everything. That night, I walked back to my apartment alone, phone still on silent. For the first time, I understood something deeply unsettling. They weren't panicking because they missed me. They were panicking because I was no longer where they'd left me. The workshop sat at the edge of a narrow road, far from anything a tourist guide would recommend. No polished showroom, no glossy branding, just rows of careful hands shaping raw material into something precise and usable. They didn't trust me at first, and I didn't blame them. I wasn't representing a big American company. I wasn't flashing titles or guarantees. I was just a woman with a notebook, a clear plan, and the willingness to sit quietly and learn how things actually worked. For weeks, I listened. I watched production cycles, asked uncomfortable questions about waste, shipping delays, quality disputes. I didn't promise miracles. I offered structure. When the first potential buyer backed out over pricing concerns, I felt the familiar urge to apologize, to soften the blow, to take responsibility for something that wasn't entirely mine. I didn't. Instead, I recalculated, adjusted logistics, reworked packaging to reduce freight volume without compromising standards. It wasn't flashy, it was effective. The order shipped on a humid Tuesday morning. No celebration, no announcement, just a signed confirmation and a quiet handshake. 2 weeks later, the payment hit my account, $4,800. I stared at the number longer than I should have. It wasn't the amount that mattered. I'd earned more in a single month back in Denver. But that money had always arrived because I was assigned a role, absorbed into a system, compensated for reliability. This was different. This money existed because I identified a problem, solved it, and carried the risk myself. If it failed, there was no department to hide behind, no manager to soften the impact. I walked for hours that day, letting the weight of that realization settle. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post about it. I sat alone in a small restaurant, ordered something unfamiliar, and paid without checking the balance first. That night, I opened my laptop and registered a consulting profile under my own name. No grand claims, just clear services, honest scope, and boundaries. Clients didn't rush in, they trickled. One referral led to another. One corrected mistake built trust. Each small success reinforced something I had spent decades doubting. I wasn't lucky. I wasn't finally being seen. I was competent, and I always had been. The difference now was simple. I stopped giving my best work away for free and stopped asking permission to take credit for it. I was in Bali when the email arrived. No subject line, just my name. At first, I assumed it was another message forwarded through family channels, filtered and softened by my mother's anxiety. But when I opened it, I saw my father's face frozen in a video thumbnail. Older than I remembered, shoulders slightly slumped, eyes unsure of where to look. I almost closed it. Instead, I pressed play. "Claire," he began, clearing his throat. "I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I need to say it anyway." He paused, searching for words he had avoided his entire life. "What we did was wrong. Your mother and I, we failed you. We got so focused on keeping the peace, on making things easier, that we stopped paying attention. You became the child we didn't worry about, and that was our mistake." I watched his hands fold together tightly in his lap. "You deserved better. We should have protected you the way we protected your sister. I'm sorry we didn't." There was no dramatic plea, no demand that I come home, just a tired man admitting something he should have faced years ago. I watched the video 3 times, not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to understand what I felt. Surprisingly, it wasn't anger. That had already burned itself out somewhere between late-night strategy calls and early morning site visits. What remained was something far more uncomfortable: acceptance. I finally saw the pattern clearly. My parents hadn't woken up one day and decided to exclude me. They drifted into it slowly, encouraged by my silence, reinforced by my willingness to adapt. I had helped build the version of myself they found easy to overlook. That realization didn't excuse them, but it freed me from waiting for a perfect apology. I closed my laptop and walked down to the beach. The air was heavy, the sky low and gray. Waves rolled in with steady indifference, unconcerned with family dynamics or emotional debts. For the first time, I understood something essential. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, and understanding doesn't demand return. I wasn't ready to go home, not because I was punishing them, but because I was still becoming someone who no longer needed their validation to exist. And that work wasn't finished yet. Barcelona felt different from anywhere I'd been before. It wasn't gentle like Kyoto or chaotic like Bangkok. It was confident, unapologetic. A city that knew its worth and didn't explain itself to anyone. I rented a small apartment near El Bon, worked from a shared office space, and kept my world intentionally narrow. Clients, research, calls across time zones. Then one afternoon, a message landed in my LinkedIn inbox. "Claire Morgan, I was given your name by a mutual contact. I've been told you've been doing exceptional work in Asia. We're having serious supply chain issues, and I'd like to speak with you directly. Victoria Reed." I didn't respond right away, not because I wasn't interested, but because I'd learned the difference between urgency and importance. I clicked on her profile instead. Senior director at a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution firm based in Chicago. 25 years in the industry. No fluff, no motivational quotes. I replied that evening. We scheduled a video call for the next morning. I arrived early, laptop open, notes organized. When Victoria appeared on screen, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'll be direct," she said. "We're losing money in Southeast Asia. Shipping costs are inflated, quality control is inconsistent, and our local partners don't trust us. I've heard you reduce freight expenses by nearly 30% for multiple small operators in under 6 months. How?" I didn't oversell it. I walked her through the process: relationship-first negotiations, regional logistics mapping, packaging adjustments that respected both cost and compliance, quality systems that worked with manufacturers instead of policing them. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "You're not talking like a consultant," she said. "You're talking like someone who's been there." "I have," I replied. "And I don't take on projects I can't stand behind." That earned a thin smile. She offered a 6-month consulting contract. Remote work, site visits as needed, compensation set at $118,000, plus performance incentives. more than I'd ever made in a single year before. I need an answer by Friday, she added. We don't have time to move slowly. After the call ended, I sat there longer than I expected, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't charity. This wasn't sympathy. This was recognition from someone who had no emotional obligation to see me kindly. Over the weekend, I turned my phone on fully for the first time in months. Notifications flooded in. Missed calls, voicemails, messages stacked on top of each other like unanswered questions. I didn't open them. Instead, I updated my LinkedIn profile. International Supply Chain Consultant, Apex Pharmaceutical Distribution. Then I posted a single line, looking forward to building something meaningful. Within minutes, my phone began ringing again. This time, I let it ring. Because for once, the world had found me, and I wasn't ready to be interrupted. The first time I spoke to my mother after updating my LinkedIn profile, she didn't ask how I was. She asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I was in a quiet cafe in Prague, laptop closed, sunlight cutting across the table. "Because I wasn't asking for approval," I said evenly. Her sharp inhale traveled through the phone. "You disappeared for almost a year, Claire. Do you have any idea what that did to this family?" "I have an idea," I replied. "I grew up in it." That was the moment the conversation shifted. No more concern, no more confusion. Just wounded authority trying to reassert itself. "You embarrassed your sister," she continued. "People asked where you were. We didn't know what to say." I smiled faintly. "You could have told the truth, that you forgot to make space for me." Silence. When Evelyn called later that day, she went straight for emotion. "I cried on my wedding day knowing you were angry with me." "Did it ruin your wedding?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, but—" "Then you were fine," I said gently. "I wasn't." She accused me of being cruel, of changing, of becoming someone she didn't recognize. And for the first time, I didn't rush to reassure her. "Maybe that's because you never really knew me," I said. Luke tried humor when he called, then irritation, then frustration when neither worked. When I asked him what day my birthday was, he laughed, and then went quiet. That silence told me everything. While my family scrambled to reposition me back into my old role, something else was unfolding quietly behind the scenes. Victoria called with urgency in her voice. "We've identified a pattern. Your former employer is shadowing our strategy. Same suppliers, same markets, same timing." A name surfaced almost immediately. Brian Cole. The man who used to present my analysis as his own. The one who'd climbed the ladder on my silence. He was now heading international strategy at my former firm. "He's watching you," Victoria said. "Your posts, your movements, your wins." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear, but clarity. "He always needed someone else's work to look smart," I said. "He just picked the wrong person to copy this time." Apex didn't hesitate. They wanted a physical presence in Denver, a message, a line in the sand. When Victoria asked if I'd return to lead the regional expansion, I didn't hesitate either. "Yes," I said, "but not as who I used to be." When I finally told my parents I was coming back, my mother sounded relieved, hopeful. "I'm not coming home," I corrected. "I'm coming back to work." And for the first time in my life, that distinction felt powerful enough to hold. Denver looked the same when I returned. Same skyline, same dry autumn air. But nothing about me fit the city the way it once had. Apex's new regional office sat on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. My name was already printed on the door when I arrived. Claire Morgan, regional director. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the handle, absorbing the quiet irony. I had left this city invisible. I came back undeniable. Brian Cole reached out within days. Coffee, he wrote? It's been a long time. I chose a cafe across the street from my office. Neutral ground, no nostalgia. When he walked in, confident smile in place, I saw the same man who had once taken credit for my work without blinking. You've done well, he said, sitting down. Impressive rise. You've been following closely, I replied. His smile stiffened. I laid it out calmly. The suppliers he'd approached, the strategies he'd copied, the confusion he'd created trying to replicate something he never understood. You mistake information for influence, I said. You can't steal trust. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. 3 months later, Apex's numbers told the story publicly. Market share gained, costs reduced, contracts locked. Brian's company faltered, then stumbled. When he lost his position, I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, just distance. The promotion to vice president came quietly. No ceremony, no applause, just a call from Chicago and a title that reflected the work I'd already been doing. My family heard about it online. We met for dinner weeks later. Neutral restaurant, polite voices. My father apologized without excuses. My mother listened more than she spoke. Evelyn admitted she'd never learned to look past herself. I didn't punish them. I didn't rescue them either. I simply told the truth. I don't need to be remembered to matter anymore. And that was enough. Life has a strange way of correcting injustice, not by shouting, but by elevating those who were once ignored. If this story resonated with you, please leave a like for the channel. Share your thoughts or advice in the comments below, and tell us where you're listening from. Thank you for staying with us until the end, and we wish you good health. See you again in the next story on the channel, Revenge Story.